My beloved child, listen carefully and do not let your mind wander even for a second, because what you are about to hear is not a coincidence, not a random thought, and not something that came from nowhere. It is a truth that has been circling around your life quietly, patiently, waiting for the exact moment when you would finally be ready to sense it, even if you were never told directly, because there is a person, a single person, the one you once imagined growing old with, the one whose presence felt like home, who has been carrying a heavy reality inside them while smiling in front of you, and they have decided, with full awareness, that you must not know it at any cost, not because they do not trust you, but because they believe this truth would change the way you look at them forever, and this belief has been haunting them day and night, shaping every silence, every delayed reply, every sudden distance, every forced laugh, and every moment where you felt something was off, but could never explain why, because the truth is, they are fighting something internally while pretending everything is fine, and the more you felt their love, the more they felt the pressure to hide what they are going through, fearing that if you knew, you might see them differently, treat them differently, or worse, walk away out of fear or helplessness, and that fear has been controlling their choices more than you realize, creating a quiet wall between you and them that neither of you ever spoke about, yet both of you felt deeply. There is a reason why your intuition has been restless lately, why your thoughts return to this person even when you try to stay busy, and why small memories suddenly feel heavier than before, because deep inside, you have already sensed that something significant shifted in their world, something they never planned to share, something they convinced themselves they must handle alone, and this decision did not come easily. It came after long nights of staring at ceilings, after conversations they rehearsed in their head but never spoke out loud, after moments where they almost told you everything but stopped at the last second, choosing silence over vulnerability, because they believe silence protects you, even though it slowly breaks them, and every time you asked how they were doing and they replied with a simple, "I am fine," it was not a lie meant to deceive you. It was a shield meant to protect both of you from a reality they feel unprepared to face together, and that is why their energy changed, their tone softened, their presence became inconsistent, not because their feelings faded, but because their inner world became overwhelming, and they did not want to pull you into a storm they themselves were still trying to understand. What makes this even more powerful is the fact that this person still imagines a future with you, still holds on to the idea of spending their life by your side, and that is exactly why they are hiding this from you so fiercely, because in their mind, love means sparing you from pain, love means standing strong even when you feel weak, love means carrying the burden yourself so the other person can remain untouched by fear, and this belief, although rooted in care, has trapped them in loneliness, because they wake up every day pretending to be the same person you knew, while internally adjusting to a new reality that changed their perspective on time, priorities, and what truly matters, and every plan they once made with you now feels fragile in their hands, not because they do not want it anymore, but because they are unsure how much of themselves they will be able to give in the future, and this uncertainty has made them cautious, distant, and emotionally guarded, even when their heart still reaches for you instinctively. You may have noticed moments where they pulled back right when things felt closest, moments where they avoided deep conversations, moments where they changed the subject when the future was mentioned, and these were not accidents, these were deliberate pauses, because every time the topic came close to commitment, forever, or shared plans, their hidden reality echoed loudly inside them, reminding them of what they are dealing with and what they are afraid to reveal, and this fear is not about rejection alone, it is about disappointing you, about becoming a source of worry instead of comfort, about shifting the dynamic from equal partners to something they cannot yet name, and that is why they chose secrecy, not realizing that this secrecy has its own consequences, because while they are trying to protect you from a truth, they are also slowly distancing themselves from the very connection that once gave them strength, creating a painful contradiction where love and fear exist side by side, each pulling them in opposite directions. Right now, what you are feeling is not imagination, it is resonance, because emotional bonds do not disappear quietly, they react, they vibrate, they signal when something important is happening beneath the surface, and this is one of those moments, a turning point where the unspoken has grown too heavy to remain hidden forever, where the silence itself has started to speak louder than words. And although you have not been told directly, you are being prepared internally to understand, to see beyond appearances, and to realize that this person's distance was never about a lack of love, but about a deep internal struggle they believed they had to face alone, and as this story continues, what you are about to discover will not only change how you see them, it will change how you understand love, strength, and the cost of protecting someone at the expense of your own peace. There is a moment, quiet and almost invisible, when a person realizes that their life has split into a before and an after, and the one you wanted to spend forever with crossed that moment without telling anyone, carrying the weight alone while still showing up for you with a familiar smile, because they did not want you to notice how everything inside them had changed, how time suddenly felt louder, how ordinary days became precious, and how every interaction with you started to feel heavier. Not because of exhaustion, but because love now came with fear attached to it, a fear that whispered that if you knew the full truth, your future plans might suddenly feel uncertain, and that whisper followed them everywhere, into conversations, into memories, into moments where they almost reached out to confess everything, but stopped themselves at the edge, convincing themselves that silence was safer than honesty, even though that silence slowly drained them, because every secret has a cost, and the cost here was emotional distance, misunderstood behavior, and a growing ache that neither of you could fully explain. What they were diagnosed with did not just affect their body or their circumstances, it reshaped how they see themselves, because suddenly they were no longer just a partner dreaming of shared tomorrows, they became someone learning how to manage vulnerability, uncertainty, and a future that now felt unpredictable, and in their mind, this shift created a dangerous imbalance. Because they did not want to become someone you would worry about constantly, someone you would feel responsible for protecting, or someone whose condition would overshadow the love you once shared so freely, and that is why they chose to hide it, believing that by doing so, they could preserve the version of themselves you fell in love with, even if it meant sacrificing their own emotional support, because they thought love meant staying strong alone, even when strength was slipping away quietly. You might wonder why they did not trust you enough to share this, but the truth is, trust is not the issue here, fear is, because fear has a way of distorting love into self-sacrifice, and in their mind, telling you would mean risking everything at once, your peace, your plans, your perception of them, and even your willingness to stay, and this fear became stronger every time they saw how deeply you cared, because the more important you were, the higher the risk felt, and so they delayed the truth again and again, waiting for a better time that never arrived, because there is never a perfect moment to reveal something that changes the future, and during this waiting, they became quieter, more guarded, more selective with their words, not because they wanted distance, but because they were trying to control a narrative that was already slipping out of their hands. What hurts the most in this situation is that they still imagine you beside them, still see your face in their future, still feel a sense of comfort when they think about you, but now those thoughts are followed by questions they never had to ask before, questions about fairness, about burden, about whether love should ask someone else to carry uncertainty alongside them, and these questions have no easy answers, which is why they have been avoiding them altogether, choosing instead to act normal, to downplay their struggles, and to present a version of themselves that feels familiar, even if it is incomplete, because they are afraid that once the truth is out, nothing will ever feel the same again, and that fear has kept them trapped in a loop of pretending and protecting, even as it slowly pulls them away from the connection they value most. And yet, despite all of this, something is shifting, because secrets are not meant to live forever, and emotional bonds have a way of demanding honesty when silence becomes too heavy, and you are beginning to feel this shift now, not because they have spoken up, but because the weight they carry has started to leak into the space between you, into pauses, into unspoken tension, into moments where their eyes reveal more than their words ever could, and this is not the end of the story, it is the tightening of it, the stage where truth presses closer to the surface, where choices will soon have to be made, and where love will be tested not by perfection, but by reality, because what comes next will force both of you to confront what love truly means when life does not follow the plan, and this revelation, when it finally arrives, will change everything you thought you understood about them, about yourself, and about the future you once imagined together. There is a silent battle happening behind the scenes, one that you were never invited into, yet you have been feeling its echoes without knowing their source, because the person you love has been living in two worlds at once, the world they show you and the world they hide from everyone, and maintaining this divide has required more strength than they ever imagined, because every day they wake up carrying a truth that reshapes their emotions, their patience, and their sense of control, while still trying to be present, loving, and normal around you, and this effort has slowly drained them, not physically in ways you could easily notice, but emotionally in ways that made them quieter, slower, and more careful, as if every word now needs permission before leaving their mouth, because one wrong sentence could expose what they are desperately trying to keep buried. And that constant self-monitoring has made them feel isolated even when surrounded by people, because no one truly knows what they are carrying, especially not the one person they wish they could lean on the most, and this loneliness has become the heaviest part of their journey, heavier than the diagnosis itself. What they never told you is how often they rehearse the moment of confession in their mind, imagining your reaction from every possible angle, imagining concern, shock, silence, questions, fear, and even forced strength, and each imagined response ended the same way, with them feeling like they had changed your life without your consent, and that thought alone stopped them every time. Because they did not want to be the reason your world felt uncertain, and so they convinced themselves that hiding the truth was an act of love, even though it required them to suppress their own need for comfort, reassurance, and understanding, and over time, this suppression turned into emotional restraint, where they stopped sharing small worries, stopped opening up about fears, and stopped expressing vulnerability altogether, because once you start hiding something big, everything else starts feeling dangerous to share as well. And this is why you may have felt like they were slowly closing off, even though their feelings for you never disappeared. The hardest moments for them are the ordinary ones, the casual conversations, the shared laughter, the plans mentioned lightly without realizing how deeply they cut, because every time the future comes up, it reminds them of the uncertainty they are living with privately, and this contrast between what is expected and what is real creates a quiet tension inside them, a tension that makes them hesitate, pull back, or change the subject, not because they do not want that future, but because they are unsure how much control they truly have over it now, and this uncertainty has made them more reflective, more serious, and sometimes emotionally distant, because dreaming feels risky when you are not sure what tomorrow holds, and yet, despite this, they still find comfort in you, still feel grounded by your presence, and still imagine you as a constant, even as they question everything else around them. There is also guilt layered into their silence, guilt for not telling you the truth, guilt for letting you sense something is wrong without explaining it, and guilt for protecting themselves emotionally while believing they are protecting you practically, and this guilt surfaces in subtle ways, in overcompensation, in sudden affection followed by withdrawal, in moments where they seem deeply connected and then strangely absent, because they are torn between wanting closeness and fearing exposure, and this internal conflict has made them unpredictable, not because their love is unstable, but because their circumstances are, and every decision now feels weighted, measured against a reality you have not been allowed to see, and this imbalance has slowly reshaped the dynamic between you, creating confusion where clarity once lived. As this continues, understand this: the silence you are experiencing is not emptiness, it is compression, the pressure of a truth that has been held too long, and pressure always seeks release, whether through words, actions, or emotional shifts, and you are standing at the edge of that release now, where the unspoken is becoming impossible to ignore, where the distance feels heavier than honesty ever could, and where something must change, because love cannot survive indefinitely in secrecy. No matter how noble the intention behind it, and as this story moves forward, the next phase will not be about what they are hiding anymore, but about what happens when hiding becomes more painful than telling, and when the choice between protection and connection can no longer be postponed. There comes a point when holding everything inside starts to feel heavier than the truth itself, and the person you once planned forever with has been approaching that point quietly, step by step, without announcing it, because the effort it takes to appear unchanged has begun to outweigh the fear of being seen fully, and this is why their behavior has felt inconsistent, why moments of deep warmth are followed by unexpected silence. Because internally they are standing at a crossroads, torn between continuing the role they have been playing and finally letting the reality surface, and this inner tension has started to shape their emotions in ways they cannot fully control anymore, making them more sensitive, more reflective, and more aware of how fragile things truly are, and every time they look at you now, they are not just seeing the person they love, they are also seeing a question they have avoided answering for too long, a question about honesty, partnership, and whether love can hold space for uncertainty without breaking. What you have not seen is how this hidden reality has forced them to confront themselves in ways they never expected, because when a person is diagnosed with something that changes how they see time, they begin to measure everything differently. Conversations become more meaningful, small moments become more intense, and priorities shift silently, and in this shift, they began to reevaluate what they owe themselves and what they owe you, realizing that shielding you from the truth might actually be denying you the chance to choose, to understand, and to stand beside them willingly, and this realization has unsettled them deeply, because it challenges the belief they have been holding on to, the belief that love means protecting someone from hard truths, even when those truths shape the future, and now that belief is cracking, slowly but unmistakably, as they begin to sense that true love might require something far more difficult than silence, something that demands courage. instead of control. You may feel like they have been watching you more closely lately, listening more carefully to your words, noticing your reactions, and this is not your imagination, because they have been trying to understand how you handle uncertainty, how you speak about resilience, how you react when things do not go as planned, and every small detail has become a test in their mind, not to judge you, but to reassure themselves that you might be able to handle the truth without losing the connection you share. And these observations have stirred conflicting emotions inside them, moments of hope followed by waves of fear, because the possibility of telling you everything feels both relieving and terrifying, like stepping into light after a long time in the dark, knowing that once they do, there is no return to pretending, no undoing the shift that honesty brings, and this awareness has made them hesitate at the edge of revelation, caught between longing for relief and fear of consequence. What complicates this even more is that they still carry memories of who you were together before everything changed, memories of ease, laughter, and unspoken understanding, and part of them is desperately trying to preserve that version of your bond, even if it means sacrificing authenticity, because they fear that once the truth is known, everything will become heavier, more serious, more cautious. And while that fear is understandable, it ignores one important truth, that distance has already begun to alter the connection in its own way, quietly reshaping it without your consent, and this realization has been dawning on them slowly, painfully, as they notice how the silence between you has grown louder, how the space feels more uncertain, and how the cost of hiding is no longer theoretical but emotional, lived, and felt every day. Now, the story is moving toward a moment that cannot be delayed much longer, because the weight they carry has started to influence their choices more openly, their energy more visibly, and their presence more noticeably, and even if no words have been spoken yet, the truth is preparing its own entrance, because when someone hides something this significant, the truth does not simply disappear, it waits, it gathers strength, and it finds a way to surface, and as this continues, you are being drawn closer to a realization that will redefine how you understand this person's distance, their silence, and their hesitation, because what comes next will not just reveal what they have been hiding, it will reveal why love, when faced with reality, must decide whether it will retreat or rise to meet it. There is a subtle shift that happens when a person realizes they can no longer outrun the truth, and the one you love has reached that stage internally, even if nothing has been spoken yet, because the act of hiding has begun to feel like a betrayal, not of you, but of the bond you once built on honesty, and this realization has been unsettling, because it forces them to confront a painful contradiction, the fact that in trying to protect you, they may have been slowly eroding the very trust that made your connection feel safe, and this awareness has made every interaction feel heavier, every shared silence more charged, and every moment together more fragile, because they now understand that love cannot survive forever in a state of performance, where one person knows the full reality and the other is left sensing shadows without explanation. What has intensified this internal struggle is the growing understanding that your presence has never been something they needed to shield themselves from, but something they needed to lean into, and this thought keeps returning to them in quiet moments, especially when they feel overwhelmed, because the truth they have been hiding has shaped their days in ways you never saw, in private adjustments, emotional recalibrations, and moments of vulnerability they endured alone, and the longer they carried it by themselves, the more they realized how unnatural that isolation felt when love was meant to be shared, and this realization has started to soften their fear, replacing it slowly with something else, a cautious hope that honesty might not destroy what you have, but instead redefine it in a more grounded, real way, even if that reality is not perfect. You may sense that they are standing closer to you emotionally now, even if they still seem hesitant, because internally they are rehearsing a different outcome, one where truth is met with understanding rather than loss, and this mental shift has changed how they look at you, how they listen, and how deeply your words register, because they are no longer just protecting a secret, they are preparing themselves for vulnerability, which is far more frightening than silence, because vulnerability removes control, and control is what has helped them cope until now, and letting go of that control means trusting you not just with their love, but with their fear, uncertainty, and unanswered questions, something they have never allowed themselves to do before. What they are beginning to understand is that love was never about presenting a flawless version of themselves, but about being seen in truth and still chosen, and this understanding has been quietly reshaping their perspective, making them question the assumptions they built around your reaction, assumptions rooted more in fear than in evidence, because every time you showed patience, empathy, or strength in unrelated moments, it contradicted the story they told themselves about needing to protect you, and these contradictions have accumulated, slowly dismantling the walls they built, not all at once, but enough to create cracks where honesty can finally breathe, and these cracks are where the next change will emerge. As this unfolds, you are closer than ever to a turning point, one where silence will no longer feel like safety, but like avoidance, and where truth, no matter how difficult, will begin to feel like relief, because what has been hidden for so long is no longer just a private burden. It is a shared crossroads waiting to be acknowledged, and when that acknowledgement comes, it will not simply explain their distance. It will challenge both of you to redefine what commitment, strength, and togetherness truly mean when life does not follow a simple script, and this moment, when it arrives, will not be quiet, even if it is spoken softly, because it will carry the weight of everything that has been left unsaid until now.